Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I'm joined by Clay Hamlin, a partner here at the firm. Clay.
Good seeing you, Mark.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get to see you guys often, but I always find that every time I come over, I learn something from you guys. And
Okay.
I think a lot of it has to come with asking the right questions. So obviously to get the right answer, you need to ask the right question. So that's what I really want to get into, the power of asking good questions.
Sure. Well, in order to manage a team and manage anyone, even yourself to some degree, but if you want to manage anyone, you have to get to know them and build a certain amount of trust. In order to do that, a really important thing to do is to ask the person good questions, like something about their life, what's going on, and not just leave it as, hey, how you doing, Mark? Oh, I'm fine, and then you move on. That kind of stuff doesn't build relationships. It's like people saying...
That's just a surface level thing.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to build a relationship with someone through email. Can it be done? Yeah, it's just a lot harder. And so what we're really focusing on in this segment is how do you develop these relationships with employees or just with even team members? And it's asking the third and fourth question. So if I say, hey, Mark, how you doing? And you're like, fine. Oh, tell me what's the coolest thing you've done in the last week. So now it gives you like something that, it requires you to kind of think about this as opposed to just fine, which is almost an automatic response. Like if you're in a
shutting
store,
down the conversation.
Yeah, like you're in a store, can I help you? No, I'm just looking. You have to get past the just looking thing. And then when you start to talk about, okay, what's the coolest thing you've done in the last week? In order to really get down even a level or two deeper than that, it's really important for me to not say, well, and here's the coolest thing I've done, and maybe even one better. That is a lot of people do that, but it really doesn't build the relationship. Now it's just saying, oh, I'm good too.
Yeah. All of a sudden the conversation becomes about the person asking the question, right?
Exactly.
And if you want to dig deeper, it has to you're peeling back layers of an onion, right?
Right. So if you don't get to like the third or fourth question on that one topic, you've probably only skimmed the surface. And so active listening, I know this seems like really simple stuff, right? But how many times, you got to think about this, if you're running a business, how often do you not get deeper than that simple surface thing? And if you aren't doing that with your team, you're not building relationships, you're not building the trust factor that needs to be there in order for a team to operate well. Without trust, now all of a sudden, all sorts of problems come in. What does that person mean by this? When something goes wrong, there's not a buffer. Now it's all of a sudden is, well, my boss just is a jerk, as opposed to, oh, that's not really how my boss really is. I understand,
you have to understand how they operate, right? Because
Yes.
once you work with someone and then you understand, well, this is why they're thinking this. This is the reason. You can start rationalizing it.
And even if you don't, even if you're like, oh, my boss is kind of a jerk on this particular thing, you'll give them some, if you have a relationship, especially one with some trust, you rationalize it maybe like, oh, well, that's a one-off. That's not the way this person normally is. So I'll give my boss some windage, if you will. I'll give him a break on this one.
My wife and I like to call it goodwill, right? You have a little rapport, so you got some wiggle room.
Reserve,
Yep.
a reserve of goodwill that you can draw on. Yes, because everybody has bad days. Everybody
Absolutely
has time pressures that doesn't allow them in that moment to really kind of explain the why and lead the person to through the process, explain what this, they shortcut it. I've done this a million times. Shortcut it, then the person's kind of like, now I don't understand the why. People really don't like doing stuff if they don't understand why they're doing it. No one wants to be just sort of the donkey here. So, well, seriously,
No, you're right.
And so, but how do you do that if you have 50 million things to do? And sometimes you shortcut the process and you are tapping into that reserve. So you better build that reserve again in times when you have a little bit more time to rebuild. And if you do it on a fairly regular basis, then you don't have to kind of think, well, what's my reserve with this person? Because you're constantly building that reserve. And yes, at times you're not going to be the best person that you want to be, the best leader that you want to be. But you're consistently building that reserve, that process, the trust that needs to be there. And a lot of it starts with questioning and asking good questions. Because really, in order to ask good questions, what you have to do? You have to listen. And you have to actively listen. And there's hardly anything that builds trust and goodwill reserve than actively listening to people on your team.
And here's the one thing before we kind of get back to asking what are good questions. The people who are active listeners, because the conversations you have with them are very, very different. Like you leave that conversation being like, wow, that was great. I want to talk to that guy again. Right.
Sure.
That. And people are kind of drawn to it. It's weird because the people want to be around those who make them, I don't want to say feel good or important, but they want to be around someone who just, I guess I would say makes them feel good. It's that feeling that they have when they leave. They're like, yeah, I do want to see that guy again. So let's get into
I do have one more point.
Sure.
It's a minor point, but I think it's important too. I learned this from watching a podcast recently, but in thinking about it, I'm like, this is a really good one. So it's not my original idea, of course, but pause. So like when you're asking, like somebody responds, you ask a question, somebody responds. If you respond to that immediately, it doesn't have the same effect on the person who you're talking with than if you pause slightly. Because when you pause, it gives it lets a person know you heard them. Especially if you're nudging into the conversation before they even finish. That's like the worst, right? But if you respond immediately, it signals to the person that you are really thinking of your next question or your thought before they even finished with theirs. And did that person really listen to me? It signals no.
That's actually brilliant because that's 100% true. Because if you think about it, if they're saying something and there's no lapse, you were already ready to go. It didn't matter what they were going to say. And on top of it, if you pause, it gives them an opportunity. Hey, if they wanted to say a little bit more, they could.
Yes. Yeah. Correct.
So let's get into that then. The good questions. What are some examples of a good question? Dependent on every person, right?
Yeah, I mean it's very situational. If you're talking about your spouse, there's good questions can be almost anything. Mm-hmm. You're just showing that you're interested in that person. I'm not sure that really any question is actually a bad question. I think it's how you approach the questions in themselves that make them good questions. So if you're listening to someone and you're actively listening and you ask a question about it, they realize you just were listening to them. Then you pause and you ask a follow-up question on the same topic. Now they know that you just listened again and paid attention to you enough that you actually can ask a logical or coherent question from that. You ask one more, now they're thinking this person's very interested. And I mean, it could be, I think it could be anything.
Mm-hmm. As long as it's relevant, right?
As long as it's relevant, sure. But ask a series of 3 or 4 follow-up questions on something that's irrelevant. It's kind of hard, to be honest with you. I think it's the act. It's a small act of service in a way to ask a question and then listen, then pause, then ask another question, then pause, then ask another. In doing that, what you're really doing is you're saying, I'm interested in what you have to say. It might not even seem like a good question to me, but if the other person keeps going in deeper, it's probably interesting to them. It's probably a good question to them, and so I find it difficult actually to say what's actually a good question and what's not such a good question. Other than maybe if I said, "Hey Tim, how you doing?" You'd be like, "My name's not Tim." Okay, maybe that wasn't such a great question, but you get my point.
Oh yeah. As long as you're kind of you're following along, but part of this really isn't just about the questions too. Then it's about communication. It's
Absolutely.
about active listening. So there's a whole lot to unbox, but asking good questions is one of those key pieces.
And you're important enough to me to listen and to actually think about what you're saying, as opposed to just keep moving, keep moving. Everyone has a million things to do, right? If you're important for me to stop my life and process and listen and follow up, like I said, it's actually a bit of an act of service, because I'm helping to lift you. You know that you're important. You're getting listened to.
Yeah, and part of that, this is also goes into relationship building, because this is all kind of connected. There are people who say, you and your partner need to find time to connect every day, and it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that being able to set aside that time doesn't necessarily matter how long, but it is quality time where you are focused. Just the two of you is like essential to me.
Sure. So I'm going to go back to your question about what's a good question, because there are some questions that I think are probably better than just any question, well listened and well positioned.
Sure.
And they're typically called high gain questions. And a high gain question is something that is important to the other person, or it's very, very likely. So let's say, for example, your child was involved in some event, right? And you told me about it. And then a week later I said, "Hey, Mark, how did that go with that blah, blah, blah event?" Okay. What that tells you is that hopefully I remembered your child's name. I remembered the event. And I remembered that for a week. Now and your child is probably important to you. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So what that tells you is I'm holding you and what's in your life important to me.
And you're aware of the events, the time frame.
Correct.
You're asking in a relevant time. Yep.
The other part of high gain questions for me and in our accounting world is what do I think would be important to our clients, and to have sometimes the courage to ask the question. So let's say, for example, we have a business owner that's maybe like 60 or in the early 60s or older. To ask them, what's your game plan? What's your exit strategy? Might on the surface seem like a very easy question to ask. However, there's also some business owners who really don't want to talk about that because it implies they're getting older, and no one wants to really think about getting older.
Fair.
But it's almost always a question that they are very interested in, even if they don't want to think about it, as long as you are the right person to ask about it. So, like, for example, if a competitor asked that question to the business owner, the business owner would be like,
they get very defensive.
"Go pound sand, my friend. I'm not telling you that." we as advisors to our clients can ask that question. It's still a bit of a courageous question, though, because you're still asking the person to think about what is their strategy. It's like asking someone, hey, do you have a will? Mm-hmm. No one really wants to think about their own death. So,
not a fun question.
It's a little bit of a courage question. Mm-hmm. But they're generally known as high gain questions. So if I go to a client and I say, hey, that interest income you got, that's a debit or a credit? And the business owner is like, why is this important to me?
Yep.
Isn't that your job? Mm-hmm. That's not a high gain question to one of our clients. But knowing and helping them think through their strategy and maximize their return when they leave, now there's a high gain question to them.
And it adds value to them, right?
Sure. And then actively listening to them, talking about people on our team. What is your progression here? Mm-hmm. Where do you want to be 2-3 years from now? How can we help you get there? Mm-hmm. There's a high gain question to someone, although it's a little bit risky. Mm-hmm. What if the person's thinking about leaving? What if the person is, has pressure at home? So again, you have to have a little bit of courage here to actually ask these questions. It's going to take some time, and you really should be ready to listen and to ask multiple questions deep.
As we kind of wrap this up, I just want to say that this is a skill.
Sure,
it is something that needs to get practiced, but it takes time. It takes time to learn it. It takes time to do it. And have you noticed changes in yourself since you've really started focusing on this?
I do pause more. I will say that, and it does help. Because sometimes when I would respond so quickly, I realized I actually wasn't the last maybe 10 seconds or whatever the person was saying. I didn't catch it exactly, and sometimes my response would actually kind of like contradict something they said in the last 10 seconds, and it looks kind of stupid.
Mm-hmm. So in many ways, it's helped you recognize not only yourself, but the other person communicating too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that wraps it up for me. Is there anything else you want to add, Clay?
No, I think that's good. Thanks,
right.
Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.